hi, everybody. My name is Valerie Sloan. I work at NCAR, National Center for Atmospheric Research. And my background is in Arctic and Alpine glacial history and geology. And now I work really in higher education, supporting people like yourselves in sort of, becoming more prepared for the world, for the workforce in grad school. And let's see, and I'm hosting this series that is on this summer with a lot of help, and one of those people is Blake. And so Blake is going to be leading this particular workshop, and he does a great job. So I'll just hand it over to you, Blake.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Val. Hi, guys. I'm Blake. It's really nice to meet you. Sorry, let me jump up here before we begin. So I guess a little bit about me. I'm a graduate student at the University of Hawaii. I'm going to be starting my third year of my PhD this fall. And today I'm going to be talking to you all about how to get into graduate school. And just a show of hands, I'm assuming most of you, because you're here, are interested in graduate school, but would you mind putting a reaction if you are thinking about it, if you're thinking about applying? Just like a thumbs up reaction or something. Awesome. Okay, this is great. And hopefully this will give you some information to help you start thinking about the process. And of course, I'm always available if you guys want to email me afterwards and chat about it. Let me know, and I'm happy to get the ball rolling for you all. So, all right, let's get started. So this is a presentation I did with one of my fellow PhD students, Alexis Cazares. So I just wanted to give her some credit as well. Okay, so what is graduate school in the natural sciences? So graduate school is essentially training to become an expert in a field or a discipline. You're contributing new information to that field, usually through publishing some papers or doing a research project. And it's considered more of an apprenticeship than it is traditional schooling like you would have in undergrad. So most of you will be doing an independent research project, a thesis or a dissertation in graduate school. That entails a lot of different things. It involves reading scientific literature, designing and executing a research project, writing proposals and writing grants, and actually conducting those experimental studies, lab work and field work. There's a lot of data analysis, interpretation, there's a lot of coding involved. You'll generally generate these publications. You'll give a thesis defense, which is like an actual presentation where the public is usually involved and your professors are involved. And then you'll present to the public sometimes as well. You take a lot of classes usually, depending on your program. Those classes will vary in the number and intensity. And lastly, there's a lot of teaching, mentoring, education, and outreach involved in being a graduate student. All right, so I just want to kind of get the chat going, get the conversation started. What are some things that you think you should consider before applying to graduate school? And feel free to type in the chat or unmute, either works. What are some things you should consider before applying? Stipend amount, that is a great one. Future career goals, yeah. What job do you want to have? Do you even need a graduate degree to go for that? Master's or PhD, fantastic. Absolutely, your research interests, yeah. Absolutely. If this is something you're going to be studying for multiple years, you want to make sure that it's something that's going to be interesting to you throughout. How much time it takes. That's a great one. Yeah, we'll talk about some the timing of different degrees like master's and PhD. Yeah, what kind of lab group you want to work with? That's huge. You want to make sure you have a good fit with the advisor and all of the other graduate students, because that's your lab family for the next few years. Yeah, what's the culture of that group? Okay, awesome. So something that was brought up in the chat, what kind of degree can you get? You can get a master's or a PhD when you go to graduate school. The difference is that a master's is usually 2 to 3 years for a research project, and a PhD is usually 5 to 7 years. And sometimes you can do a professional master's that will generally be like 1 year, and sometimes there's not a research component to those professional masters. When it comes to classes, the master's degrees and the PhD students take similar degrees, at least at my university. It can change at different universities, but for us, we take about 8 to 10 graduate level courses, and this number will vary depending on what program you're applying to. For a PhD, you take something called a comprehensive exam. I'll be taking mine this fall, but basically it's just a review of all of your coursework, and you have a bunch of professors that sit there and they basically give you like an oral exam, and they basically just grill you and make sure that you can talk your way through all of the core material before you move on to candidacy. Masters don't usually have the comprehensive exam. And then, of course, finally, you'll put out a product. And for masters, you're writing and defending a thesis. I'm in the oceanography department, and in oceanography, it's your thesis is usually 1 or 2 peer-reviewed papers. And then for PhD, you write and defend a dissertation, and that's going to be often 3 or more peer-reviewed papers, and they have a common theme. Okay, so something that we want to talk about and just kind of let you all be aware of is graduate school is not for everyone, and that's okay. But if you think you want to go, I think it's definitely worth a shot. But here's some things to consider. What's your ideal profession, and what are the minimum qualifications required? Do you want to be a professor, a research scientist? Do you want to work in industry, the private sector, the government? Kind of start looking around at the different jobs that are available. You can look on, there's like Glassdoor, there's a couple other sites out there that will post job descriptions, and you can take a look at what the minimum qualification is for that. And if you see a job you like and it only requires a master's, then go for it. And you can always extend into a PhD once you're in grad school if you want to. So what could grad school do for you? There's different skills you can get, connections, the degree itself, but there's a lot of different reasons you might want to go to grad school, and those are all benefits. What excites you? Someone mentioned this in the chat. What's your passion for science? Do you have a passion for learning, exploring knowledge gaps? That's all going to be really important to carry you through your graduate degree. And are you ready to do an independent research project? Since you all are in REUs, I'm guessing you have a little bit of research experience. But if you haven't had a bunch of research experience and you don't feel ready to do an entire research project on your own, then maybe a master's might be a good place to start for you. And this is a big one. Do you tolerate or even like scientific reading and writing? That's a lot of what you'll be doing in graduate school. And so you got to make sure that you have an interest in that and that you like it or at least tolerate it. And someone mentioned this in the chat as well. Is a salary of 20K or to around 37K doable for you, and for how long? Because for the PhD, that's 5 to 7 years. So that's something to keep in mind, is this isn't a huge pay stub right here. So can you do that for a long amount of time? All right, so how do you start applying for the graduate school process? The application process, at least in Earth, Biological, and Environmental Sciences, is a little bit different than like it is for undergrad. In undergrad, you're generally just submitting an application and you'll get reviewed and you'll know if you got accepted or not. In graduate school, you're specifically applying to work with one faculty member or a couple, and you're not just applying to the school in general. Your admission absolutely depends on fit with the lab and funding, and it depends on the salary right here. So the reason it depends on funding is you get paid to go to graduate school, and if your professor has a grant that can pay you, that's going to determine whether they admit you or not. If they don't have funding, you're not getting this salary, and then it's difficult to get in. But there are ways around that. There's a couple different kinds of funding that you can get through the school or through your advisor. You can get a research assistantship, which is working on a faculty grant, usually on your dissertation project. You can get a graduate assistantship, and that might be working on another faculty member's grant. It's usually different from your dissertation project, but it will still pay your salary. There's teaching assistantships. So that would be where you're teaching a class generally, and that will pay for your tuition and for your salary. And lastly, if your advisor doesn't have funding, you can always get external funding in the form of a student fellowship. And there's a lot out there. I'm happy to talk more about that a little bit later, but the big ones are the NSF GRFP. If you're in the marine science field, Noah Nancy Foster is huge. American Meteorological Society has a few fellowships. There's the Fulbright Fellowship, and then the Hertz Fellowship, and there's a bunch more out there. NOAA and Sea Grant are a great place to look. Yeah,
Blake? Yeah, I wanted to add on, when you're looking at the grad school salary, also look at the cost of living in that place, because they don't match necessarily, and it's not even across the country. So in some places that are pretty reasonable to live, they have sometimes a higher stipend just because of other reasons. Sometimes in expensive places like Hawaii, they may not have such a high stipend. There's no rule that goes across all of the universities. And so that's something to consider, as well as, do you want to live in that location? Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for the contribution. And the other thing is a lot of these fellowships, they'll pay you at the higher end of this scale. So they're definitely worth applying for, and they're great professional development opportunities as well. Okay. So where do you begin if you want to go to graduate school? It's this giant process, and there's a lot of things that happen behind closed doors that we're going to try to open a little bit for you today. So when you start, you generally need to have an idea of what you want to study. When you're reaching out to professors, you want to have a general idea of the research topics that you're interested in, because you're going to be studying those things for 2 to 3 or 5 to 7 years. And the professors want to see that you're serious about that. Some professors expect that you come in with research questions in mind, but others expect that you just come in with a general research topic that you're interested in. But either way, here's some tips to start thinking about your research project. So again, just in the chat, or feel free to unmute if you'd like to say it out loud. How might you go about trying to pick a research topic for your graduate research project? This is a tough one. You might have a lot of ideas floating around, but how do you narrow in on that one topic that you really want to explore? Does anyone have any ideas?
You can write it in the chat if you don't want to speak up.
Yeah, use a previous undergrad capstone or thesis project for inspiration. Absolutely. With any project you do, you're never going to fully resolve it. There's always going to be more questions that come up, and those are great topics you can explore in graduate school if you're really interested in that undergrad project. It's a great one, Elizabeth.
A topic that has enough data to be studied, but that is not too common, you know, that it's like common knowledge.
Yeah. Sorry if I misheard you, but I think you said if there's data already available for that project, there's tons of data out there that's just waiting to be analyzed, and professors are often looking for students that can just get in there and analyze it. So that's great. Yeah, like utilizing what's available already.
I think he also meant look for the questions that are not answered. I'm not sure if that's what.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that comes in the form of, you know, literature research and everything, talking to people and figuring out where those knowledge gaps are. Yeah, totally targeting those questions that are unanswered. Ali said, search for scientific papers related to your general field of study and see what more specific topics come up. Absolutely, that's a huge one. Okay, cool. So we have this little diagram for you about picking your research topic. And first things first is to think about the topics that you find interesting. So what broad research topics do you find interesting? Think back to undergrad lectures that you found interesting. Are there any unanswered questions from your undergrad research that you'd like to continue? Elizabeth nailed that one. Have you read any papers that you thought were interesting? That one was Ali's suggestion. So these are good places to start. Where did you get that spark of passion that just really interested you, and could be something that you'd be interested in studying further? Okay, once you've kind of honed in on at least a broad topic, you've maybe read some papers, you can also think about methods that you're interested in pursuing. So what research methods are you interested in? Do you like field work versus lab work versus computer work? And, you know, the general truth is that you'll be doing all of these things in graduate school, but there's definitely degrees and programs that you'll be doing one more than the other. And it's really important to be honest with yourself. Which do you enjoy and which do you avoid? I think a lot of students will do like remote sensing work. They'll do a lot of coding and modeling, and that's very computer work heavy. And a lot of students really love that. There's other programs where you could be, you know, scuba diving every day and doing coral reef transects, and that's where you're gathering the most of your data, and there's less of a lab work component. And of course, computer work is going to be involved with making graphs and visualizing data and everything. So be honest with yourself and try to balance all of those different components. Another thing to consider is, what methods do you have experience with already? And what methods would you like to learn more about? I just want to say that in graduate school, you have so much opportunity to explore any different kind of method that you want. And I'll just give a personal anecdote. When I was in undergrad, I did some molecular barcoding work. So I had a lot of DNA work experience. And then I am using that to study food webs. And so when I applied to graduate school, I really wanted to incorporate that. And there was a whole field to study food webs that I wasn't even aware of, which is using stable isotopes. That terrified me. I had never read a paper about stable isotopes. It was it was very intimidating, but my advisors kind of introduced me to that and helped me get papers and read through that. And now I do a ton of isotope work as well. So don't be intimidated by these new methods that are coming out, and really just sink in and try to learn them and explore them. So you don't have to just go with the things that you already have experience with. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Sometimes I know that I went to a internship in Flagstaff, and it just depends what the lab has to, like what kind of instrument they have in their room, in their lab, and what you can work with. It just depends too. So pretty much you kind of have to just how you're gonna do your research and what kind of instrument they have, the equipment they have.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you can definitely send samples to external labs for processing as well. But that's a great thing to consider, is if you want the hands-on experience. Let's say for me with the isotope work, there is an isotope lab at the university I'm at that I get to work with. But that's a great point. If there's not an isotope lab, maybe you can send your samples off, but are you getting that same hands-on experience? So that's another great thing to consider as well. Okay. All right, so once you have that general idea for yourself of what you want to study and maybe the methods that you want to go into to get there, this is where you can start looking into the literature and start figuring out what opportunities are available. So looking into the literature is really important, and I would recommend that you look for more recent papers rather than something that came out in 1980 or 1990. Look for the papers that have come out in the last 10 years, and that'll give you an idea of what the big topics are that are being discussed in the field currently. It's really important to consider what's already been done and what hasn't. You might have a lot of great ideas, and some have already been done and some haven't been done to completion, and that you can kind of work your way into. So look to be inspired in new directions as you read. Are there questions that you're going through and you go, that's interesting. They looked at this, but not this component of it. And that's a great way to start thinking about projects you can do. When you're reading these papers, write down questions as you go. For me, even still, when I read research papers, it takes me probably a good 3 or 4 times reading through to actually kind of grasp what's going on there. So don't be afraid to ask questions and get write down questions that you want clarification on, and ideas for future research questions to explore. And the next bit of this is kind of talking to your advisors about these papers and talking to the authors and really trying to get those questions answered so you get a better idea of the paper and the research. All right, so as you're doing that, talk to your current mentors and advisors, discuss and ask for feedback on your ideas, on the papers you're reading, on the questions you have, and absolutely ask for more papers to read. There's always going to be another paper that you weren't aware of that someone can point in your direction, and that can often really help with your development of your project ideas. And, I'm assuming most of you have current mentors and advisors since you're in REU programs and you're working with people that can fill that role. But if you don't have any current mentors, ask your professors that teach your classes that you feel you have a good connection with, or you can ask us, and we're happy to connect you with different scientists and teachers and professors that we know in different fields as well. Okay. So now you've kind of got this idea of your research topic. You're maybe starting to pigeonhole what exactly you want to do. And this is the most important part of this graduate school application process, is start building a network with those that do the work that you want to get involved in. So how do you do that? This is really intimidating, but start building your research network by looking into the people that are doing the research that's being done currently. There's a lot of ways to do that. As you're reading papers, take note of the authors, what institutions they're at. You can Google them, and usually they'll have like a lab webpage that you can read through. You can look at the collaborators they've worked with. So lab pages are great. Researchers at organizations like USGS or NOAA or all of these other great research organizations, they'll generally have staff profiles of what they're interested in. You can find CVs online. You can look at ResearchGate, LinkedIn, Science Twitter is huge. People will repost opportunities they have for graduate school all the time. So see if those professors or researchers have a science Twitter. And that way you can start getting an idea of who the players are in the field. And once you have a good idea of that, start reaching out and talk to these scientists about one of their papers. So this is the best thing that I think you can do, is read a paper from a scientist you want to talk to, send them an email, it can be a cold email, and just say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm really interested in going to graduate school. I read your paper on this. I thought it was really interesting and I had some questions. Would you have maybe 20 minutes to chat with me sometime in the next couple of weeks? And I will say that most people are very willing to talk to early career scientists and to give you their perspective on their journey to graduate school. And also, if you read their paper, it shows them that you did your homework and you know who they are and you're coming prepared with really great questions. I would say when you're reaching out to these scientists, maybe start with graduate students and staff researchers at like NOAA, USGS, those kinds of organizations. Save professors and potential advisors for last, because I will say you will grow so much and learn so much as you're talking to these people. And when you talk to the professors, you want to be at your best potential. So this is a great thing to do. Just start talking to people and bounce your ideas off of them and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. I think that this could be a potential avenue to go down. And they'll give you feedback on your ideas, and it's really formative and really great. So lastly, tell them you want to go to graduate school. They love to talk about their journey and yours as well. So talk to them about the research topics you find interesting. Talk about their experience applying to graduate school, any tips they have, any advice. All right, just continuing this thought, I think this is the most important question that you can ask all of these scientists that you're talking to. Find out what the knowledge gaps are by asking, if you had unlimited time and funding, what's the next research question that you'd explore? These people will give you a project because they have so many ideas and they just don't have the time or money to do it. And they would love for a graduate student to follow up and make that idea come to completion. And people will be very honest. And these are where you can get a lot of the ideas for a graduate project is from those researchers. The last thing that you should ask these people when you're talking to them is, do you know any other scientists or faculty in the field to reach out to? Because there's going to be people you're not even aware of from Google searches, and oftentimes they can email introduce you to the next person. And they're a lot more likely to respond if someone they work with and know and trust says, hey, I just met this really cool student. Would you mind talking to them about X, Y, and Z? That's a great way to get some responses. So I know it's scary, but cold email these people. And if your advisor happens to have a connection with them, you can ask for an email introduction as well. So ask those current advisors and mentors to introduce you to contacts in the field. Okay, how are you guys doing? Just a little pulse check. Can you give me a reaction in the chat for how you're feeling about grad school and the process of starting? Okay, got some applause, that's good. Thumbs up, awesome. It's a scary and long process, but hopefully we can like break it down and make it accessible for you all. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Okay, cool. So let's do another interactive. Oh, sorry, I see something in the chat. Oh, no questions. Cool. All right, so let's do another just kind of open-ended question. What are some things that you think you should consider when you're seeking a potential research advisor? Oh, Ali, absolutely. I will be providing you my email, and I have some other resources I can send you as well. All right, so what are some things we should consider about a potential advisor? Anyone? Bueller? Okay. Got some in the chat. Okay, their vision for their research and how they run their labs. That's a huge one. Absolutely huge. Do you want someone who is really invested in their students and works hands-on with them? Or do you want someone who's kind of more of a figurehead and is a leading expert in the field, but is very hands-off? That's a great one to consider. If they have funding or space for a new student, absolutely. I remember when I was applying, there was one lab that it was 12 graduate students in it. So if you're thinking about that, are you going to be getting the individual time that you want or need from the advisor? And a lot of students in that lab said that there was a great lab culture and they all help each other, but it's really hard to get time with the advisor. So that's not necessarily good or bad, but it is something to consider for what you want. Yeah, how large their lab is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Something also to consider is what stage in their career they're at. If you have a young faculty person, they're often really hungry for research and they just want to get involved and really help you out a lot. And sometimes if you have an older faculty member that's maybe on their way to retirement, sometimes they're less accessible or less, yeah, I guess less available. So those are things to consider. Obviously, there's exceptions to that. Location's huge. Yeah, where do you want to go for these couple of years that you'll be doing graduate school? Val says you can also pose a kind of question in a cold email, like I read your paper on X. That was interesting. I have been wondering how you decided to use the threshold or criteria of X, Y, and Z. Without a question mark to indicate you don't expect an answer, it shows you were paying close attention to the paper. Yes, I guess this goes back to reaching out to the building your network and starting to reach out to scientists.
Sorry, I'm
Okay.
late.
Oh, no worries. It's great advice. Okay. So how do you find the right lab/potential advisor? And we touched on some of these things, but definitely something you should do is investigate recommendations from the scientists you talk to. People will generally be very honest about their experience working with certain people. So listen to red flags if they come up, if they have certain things to say, but oftentimes it'll be very, very positive and very supportive. Explore the university websites and faculty pages and lab pages. You can find a list of their previous and current graduate students. Graduate students will be very brutally honest about how it is working with that advisor. And I wouldn't be nervous about asking. They're not going to go like report back to the advisor that so-and-so asked this. So they'll be very honest. You can also look at like Rate My Professor pages. That often has to do with how they are as a teacher, maybe not as a research advisor. So take that with a grain of salt. But if there's any big red flags in a Rate My Professor review, that's a good thing to consider. Okay, so then how can you find more potential advisors? Explore lists of authors on papers. We kind of talked about that a little bit already. But just start figuring out who the players are in the field, and then you can start thinking about the PIs, the research advisors that are doing that work. Okay, so here's the fun part. Let's say you've done all that network building. You have a good idea of what you want to study. You know how you want to do it, and you're ready to reach out to the advisor. This is terrifying, right? Like you're reaching out to someone who's a brand name in the field that is going to make or break whether you move on into graduate school and start your career. So you want to make sure that that email to them is really, really strong. And I have an activity for us. I want us to read a couple of different emails, and I want you to tell me what's good about them and what's bad about them. So maybe have that mulling in the back of your mind as we read this one. Okay, you guys ready? All right. Dear Dr. X, I hope this email finds you well. My name is X, and I'm reaching out to you to inquire if you're accepting incoming advisees at the master's level for next year. As a senior marine science major at X, I'm applying to graduate programs this fall with an interest in the effects of anthropogenic impacts on marine ecosystems. I find your work incredibly interesting, and University of X's Master's in Ocean and Earth Sciences is my top choice for graduate school. I'd like to work with you as an advisee throughout my master's degree. I plan to apply for the Fulbright, and I'm hoping that you would consider me as an advisee. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to your response. All right, for this one, I'd love it if you all could unmute and let me know what you're thinking. Let's start with the positives. What did this student do well?
I think they did a great job introducing themselves, and it's very clear who they are, where they come from. So if I was getting this email, I would know if I even feel comfortable continuing the conversation based on my research and where I think that they might fit or might not.
Sure. Yeah, they mentioned their major. That's great. They mentioned that they want to do a master's degree. Yeah, they mentioned their interests at least. Any other positives?
It seems like they're really excited about doing their master's degree at this specific institution.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's move on to some areas of improvement, because I think there's quite a few. What do you all think about areas of improvement? Okay, Ali said way too broad. Should probably specify a paper or two to show interest. Absolutely. I find your work incredibly interesting. Did they even, if I'm the professor, I don't even know that they know what I do. I don't know that they read my papers. I don't know if they know what our lab group does. You absolutely want to say, oh, I read X, Y, and Z papers. I'm really interested in X, Y, and Z topic that you explored. And yeah, that is all great stuff to include. So yeah, it was a little bit broad. Any other areas of improvement? How about this research topic? The effects of anthropogenic impacts on marine ecosystems. What could that mean? That could mean anything. You could be studying plastic pollution, you could be studying sound pollution, you could be studying climate change, ocean acidification, you could be studying any number of things. So that is really, really broad. This is where, when you're talking to that research network that you're building of those grad students and other researchers, they're going to help you hone in on an idea or topic that you really want to study. And it's okay if this is your start. Your start statement is that you want to investigate effects of anthropogenic impacts on marine ecosystems. That's great, but you definitely want to hone in a little bit and make sure it's tailored to that advisor that you're applying to.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Just basically how you balance knowing what you want to study. For example, you mentioned it was too broad, but not be too specific that you're like, oh, I want to study, I don't know, ants on the Antarctica, something very, very specific that don't leave a room for if the professor wants another thing, you know, you can't do that.
Yeah, that is a fabulous question. Okay, so I'll give you just like a personal anecdote with this one. So I knew that I was interested in food webs. That's what I wanted to study. And that was my broad topic. And then I kind of was thinking about what interests me, and I'm really into predators. Like I like the top predators. And because I'm an ocean person, I was like, okay, let's go sharks, let's go tuna, let's go like all these big predatory fish. And so I kind of started going down that rabbit hole. And there's not a lot of people who study top predators, but there are a lot of people who study food webs and are really interested in the ecological questions around that. So my advice for that is stick to the like big picture with a couple ideas of little projects you could do, but maybe don't go down into like, I want to study ants and I want to study their interaction with this one specific thing, because you might not find an advisor that's really interested in that one thing. So think about the big questions that you want to answer and then little projects for how you could address that. And those could be the different chapters of your thesis, for example, or your dissertation.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Great question. Ali has in the chat, I think the whole email is a little too forward. Is it common practice to get to know the potential advisor before telling them you want to work with them? That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of your first point of contact. So I think it's good to show that you're interested. And after this, generally they'll respond and say, hey, do you have 30 minutes for a FaceTime or like a Zoom or whatever? And then you'll kind of start to suss that out and build that relationship after. But I think it's okay to say, hey, I'm really interested in this work. I've like looked into your papers. It seems like our research interests align and I'd love to meet and talk to you. So I think it's okay to be somewhat forward because you are making a request. Elizabeth said, I feel like this email should request to set up a meeting, not directly ask to be an advisee. Absolutely. Yeah, the last sentence should be, do you have 30 minutes to set up a Zoom call? And so we can meet and chat. Okay, awesome job, you guys. This is great. Let's look on to the next one. Okay, sorry, this one's a bit long, but here we go. Dear Dr. X, I hope this email finds you well. My name is X, and I'm reaching out to you at this time to inquire if you are accepting incoming advisees at the master's level for next year. As a senior marine science major and statistics minor at X, as well as a Barry Goldwater scholar with extensive marine science undergraduate research experience, I'm applying to graduate programs this fall with an interest in exploring anthropogenic impacts on deep sea ecosystems, as well as the process of how to use research results to influence policy. I've been referred to your lab by Dr. X in the X lab at X, where I have been performing research for the past 2 years, and in doing so have become incredibly interested in your work determining baselines for diel vertical migration and seeing how patterns may change as a result of deep sea mining. I'd like to work with you as an advisee throughout my master's degree should I attend X, and I'm currently in the process of applying for NOAA's Nancy Foster program as a way to fund that degree. I have outlined an idea for a project below and would love to meet you sometime in the near future. Would you have 30 minutes or so to meet with me sometime in the next couple weeks? Here's a sample project idea I have. Project goal, establish a baseline of diel vertical migration in the Papahanaumokuakea National Marine Monument here in Hawaii, and one for a location in the Clarion-Clipperton zone to use as a comparison. These baselines will be established to find a possible after effect of deep sea mining. When mining begins, use this as a baseline to see if mining within the CCZ is also affecting the national monument. Is there a spillover effect, spatial transition of organisms away from the mining areas, sediment plumes reaching the monument? Base project question, what are the patterns of diel vertical migration within the Papahānaumokuākea National Monument and the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, and do they differ? In addition, I have attached my curriculum vitae for your review. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I look forward to your response. All right, what y'all think? Let's start with the positives.
It's more specific and has the call to action to have a reunion.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's super specific. It's asking for the results of the impacts of deep sea mining on a specific thing, diel vertical migration, which is something a lot of animals do. So that's very specific. It's a good one. Other positives?
Okay.
What about that, the funding thing? The student had mentioned that they were applying for, oh my goodness. Okay, sorry. The student had mentioned that they were applying for NOAA's Nancy Foster. So that's good. They're mentioning that they're pursuing outside funding just in case this professor doesn't have funding. Okay, I see a couple things in the chat. They outlined, yep, funding and plan to pursue, exactly. Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, what about some things to improve upon? It's not concise enough. Yeah, it kind of rambles a little bit, right? Like even as you're reading it, it's kind of wordy. Professors get tons of these emails and you just want it short, sweet, to the point. So I would say 2 to 3 paragraphs, straight to the point. And yeah, so it's a bit long. Okay, little too broad, says Emma. Okay, yeah. So I think the project goal section is kind of interesting. I think it's okay to say that you're interested in these big topics and then like, impacts of deep sea mining, and then hone in a little bit on, I'd like to look at changes in diel vertical migration patterns. I think that's fine. I think this section is a little bit too much, in my personal opinion. Any other things that this student could improve upon?
And when you say you think it's too much, do you mean sort of going too far?
I think it's a little unnecessary because I think they mentioned what they were interested in up here.
Right.
So for me, this is like, yeah, it's a great idea. It has a lot of extra detail, but I don't think it's necessary. I think that's something you could talk about with the professor once you actually meet them face to face. You can say, hey, like I have an idea for this project. What do you think? But for the reach out email, I think it's a bit much.
Yeah, I agree. And it could come off as being sort of arrogant. The professor thinking, wow, this person thinks they want to tell me what kind of research we should do. And even if that's not the intention, it could come across like that.
Totally agree.
I have, it's more of a question, but it's the first couple of lines, right? Is that too straightforward, or is it due to be so concise and have like bottom line writing?
That's a good question, because I think sometimes if you like, let's say we had this bit that's saying, I'm reaching out to you to inquire if you're accepting incoming advisees at the master's level. Let's say that was the last thing that the student had put. The professor would have to get through multiple paragraphs before even realizing what the email's about. So I think it's okay to upfront just say, hey, I'm a prospective graduate student, and I'm wondering if you're taking students next year for either master's or PhD. I think that's okay. Yeah, and I think it's very clear what the student is asking for. I think they made a great case for why they should go to graduate school, and it looks like they did their research on a couple different topics that person studies. They were recommended by a lab, so that's interesting. The last thing that I wanted to say is a big positive for this is they attached a CV. So you should absolutely attach your resume or your CV to this. So that way, if the professor's interested, they can go and look through your different research experiences, publications, if you have any, and all of that kind of stuff that you've been involved in. So definitely include your CV as well.
I have a question. Maybe Maybe just like getting to know the professors, what they really do. So they'll know that you're sincere and, just, you're not just like, want to just hurry up and just throw all this broad subject on him and just trying to like get him confused and what you really want to do,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And make sure you know what they do, like read a bunch of their papers and make sure that you actually are a good fit with their lab. Look at their lab pages and see that. Another thing, when you're looking at their lab web pages, sometimes there's a tab that says we're accepting new students or something along those lines. And I even saw it in one, it said, write to me in the headline your favorite color and say, I'm a prospective graduate student. So that professor was checking to make sure that they'd done their homework and like looked through the lab web page and made sure they were following directions. So please do your due diligence because they'll just ignore if you didn't. Okay, cool. When you guys are reaching out to potential advisors, feel free to email me. I'm happy to look over your reach out emails. We can give feedback. We can kind of talk through that process. So please feel free to reach out if you want some help with that part of it. I see Val in the chat. It's a good idea to attach a piece of your work, such as a poster, presentation, or project. Also create and update your LinkedIn page. It does get looked at. You can upload a poster PDF to LinkedIn. Yeah, great advice. Okay. So we kind of covered a lot of this, so I'll just go through this quick, but tips for emailing potential advisors: introduce yourself and the ask that you're applying to graduate school. Mention your research interests and briefly any experience you may have. Relate that to their research interests and highlight overlaps. Mention their specific publications that you actually read, because they might ask you about it later in your phone call. List any funding opportunities that you're applying for. Ask if they're taking students and if they have time to meet. Attach your CV to the email and thank them for their time. And no more than 2.5 to 3 paragraphs total. It should be concise, short, sweet, to the point. Your CV will detail a lot of the stuff you've done and you can talk to them later. Okay, how do you guys feel about emailing professors? Do you have a good idea of what you should include? Okay, saw a nod, that's great. Thumbs up, cool.
Yes, I wanted to ask if they
Yeah,
don't respond the first time. I've heard that it's okay to send a second, but maybe a third. It's
absolutely okay. Yep, that was the last point that I forgot I had in here. Be persistent. It's okay if they don't respond the first time. They get tons of these emails and they are very, very busy. I'd say give it a week. If they don't respond after a week, you can reply and say, hi, just checking in. My name is Blake. Quick summary again. I'm a prospective graduate student really interested in this work. I'd love to chat with you if you have the time. And that's okay. It's not pushy. It's just like a little reminder. And you can email even up to 3 times. I'd say maybe after 3, just kind of give it up. I will say one of my friends is in the physical oceanography department, and she emailed her professor 3 times. He ignored it the first time, the second time, and then the third time she responded, and he responded back and said, oh, you really are serious about this. Okay, let's have a phone call and we can talk through it. So don't get discouraged if they don't respond at first. You can absolutely follow up. Okay. Cool. Let's move on to the next part. So let's say you've done all this, you've reached out to a faculty member and they've responded and they said, yes, I'd love to meet. What do you talk about in the first time that you're meeting with them? I just want to say it can be a casual conversation or it can be a full-blown interview. So my advisor, the first time that I talked to him, I thought we were just gonna like get to know each other and like talk about a research interest. No, it was a full-blown interview. He was asking me like full-on interview questions. So let's go through what some of the things they could ask you are. Expect an interview. Prepare to be asked about yourself. Why do you want to go to graduate school? What are your research interests? What are your previous research experiences? What work experience do you have, if applicable? What are your long-term career goals? Be prepared for those questions and be prepared to talk about yourself. So just answer those questions for yourself and have them prepared in your mind. Secondly, you are interviewing them. They are not just interviewing you because you want to find out if this is a good fit. So come prepared with questions. If they say, do you have any questions for me? And you say no, it's kind of showing them that you're not really that interested. So these are some questions you can ask them about. How would you describe your advising style? What is your lab's culture like? What are your expectations for your students? What is the school like? What about the program do you want to know more about? And other great things to ask are, what's it like living in this location? What's the cost of living there? What's the lifestyle like? And this will really show that you're serious, and you can ask a lot of these questions to the graduate students as well to figure out if this is a good fit for you. Okay. So be prepared for an interview. Okay. So that's kind of the whole process in a nutshell. Do you all have any questions for me? Yeah, Jalen?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi. Okay, awesome. It's Jalen, but also,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's okay. Can you go into kind of the nitty-gritty of applying? Like when you applied, did you have to do, personal insight questions? Did you have to do 3 letters of rec? Did you have to do a CV or a resume or both? Did you have to do a cover letter? Just like the actual like online portal type application process. Like, can you go over like your experience with that and what you needed to get in order before you even press send?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the application itself is going to depend on the school that you apply to, essentially. So it could vary, but yeah, we definitely had letters of rec. There was like a personal statement. I think that was kind of it. But some schools might ask for like a research statement where you have to kind of outline what your idea of your project is, and hopefully your advisor would help you with that if they were serious about admitting you. For the personal statement, there's a lot of things that go into a personal statement, and we're actually going to have a GRFP workshop a little bit later where we're going to go through how to write a personal statement. So if you would be interested in attending that, we'll go into a lot more detail, but personal statement is a great place to say who you are, why you're interested in science, and why they should pick you over another student. What's the unique perspective that you bring? You can talk about your previous research experiences. I would highlight the tools that you have built from those research experiences. Say like, I have these research skills. I know how to do this lab work. I presented at these conferences. I do this work with the community in terms of education and outreach. Like those are all things that you should include in the personal statement. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry if I missed a part of it.
No, that was great. I have kind of a follow-up question. So do you talk to, I guess, professors or potential PIs and all of that before you even apply to a school? Like, let's say I want to go to MIT. Before I even look at the application, I need to be talking to people, getting research done, because it's not the other way around. You're shaking your head. So I'm guessing it's like, I should be talking to people first.
You are absolutely correct. The best way that I can describe the graduate school application process, and this is going to sound dumb, it's like dating. You are going to basically do some light online stalking, maybe look at their Instagram and see if you're interested. You're going to look at their lab page, you're going to look at some of their publications, and then when you reach out, that's like the first contact email. And they're going to look at you and say, like, okay, I'm interested in this student. And then you have your first date, and you meet online and you do the little interview. And if everything goes well, they'll say, why don't you talk to my graduate students? So now you're meeting the family, right? So you're talking to the graduate students, and they might even invite you to a lab meeting. And then at this point, you should maybe be a little wary that they're probably seeing other people, and you're probably seeing other people as well. And you're talking to other professors, they're talking to other students. And then if it's serious, they'll probably ask you for a Zoom call, and they'll really show you that they're committed and say, hey, I want you to apply to the program. I think you'd be a great fit. And that's when you should apply and submit your application. If you do what you do in undergrad and just send an application to a bunch of different schools, that is an excellent way to waste about $500. So this process is expensive. It is time intensive. It is hard, but I hope that you all feel like you have a little bit of a support network. We're happy to help you through this. But to answer your question, yes, please, please, please do that whole process. Talk to the professor before you apply. Sorry, I just want to say there are some exceptions. My friend is in a biochemistry program, and it's a little bit reversed. She actually just submitted an application, and then when she got admitted, they did like rotations to figure out who the advisor was after. So it depends on the program, but for most natural sciences, it's this way that they do it. But yeah,
It's
be aware
worth-
that different schools do different
It's
things.
worth checking out, right? Because that can be the case where you apply to the department and then they decide together who
And
lots to
maybe-
do with funding too, what funding is available.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would say maybe reach out to some graduate students, maybe not even in the lab that you want to apply to, but maybe reach out to some graduate students at that school and ask them how the process was for them. And that's the best way you can get an insight into that.
And ask them also, just do they like this person? Are they a good advisor? And you want to keep an eye out for people that are trouble. I mean, not all of these people are nice or good advisors. So it's important to avoid terrible advisors. So do find out what, from, as he says, from ideally grad students. You can also kind of ask office staff. They're not supposed to say much, but they might, they might say, oh, so-and-so is fabulous, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a big undertaking, but in the end, hopefully you get a job that you really enjoy that's a little bit more complicated or in a good way than maybe without a degree, like a master's degree. So it can be really worthwhile, but it's not an easy, I think it's not an easy experience as you've seen, with regards to like the pay and the cost of living and the effort and all of that, the time.
I just want to mention about funding because Val just mentioned it. Some schools, I just want to say, like the University of California system, they have money for TAs to bring in new students. So even if the advisor doesn't have funding, they'll say, oh, you can TA for the first couple of years. But for example, at my school, they don't offer TA-ships to first year incoming students. So just ask, it's a different situation at every place.
And the TA being, maybe you said a teaching assistantship. So for example, teaching labs or, what do you call them, seminars?
Right. Yeah, go for it.
Oh yeah, sorry, just had a question. When to do this? Like, let's say I want to enter grad school fall of 2025. When should I start making the contact with the professors and things like that?
That is an excellent question, and I'm actually going to link you to something really quick. Okay. Everyone, please feel free to use this. I'm going to drop this link in the chat. This is a Google Drive that I put together, and it's almost like a step-by-step for how to get into graduate school. And the very first document in there has a timeline. And that is a great thing to look at. But to answer your question just out loud, I would say July is a great time to start thinking about, which we're coming up on, start thinking about the graduate school process, maybe start reaching out to some of the graduate students or researchers to talk and kind of build your ideas. I would say reaching out to a professor, that should happen probably like late August, early September. October can kind of be pushing it. So I would aim for September, early September. And then there are fellowships that have deadlines, like the GRFP's deadline is like around October 20th. So if you reach out earlier rather than later, that's a great time to ask them for feedback on your personal statements, on your research statements, those kinds of things. So I would shoot for like probably mid-August to mid-September is a good time to shoot for reaching out.
2024 in your case, Gabrielle.
Right. Yeah, you would be reaching out in fall of 2023 to start graduate school in fall 2020.
Yeah, basically a year before. So,
right.
Thanks.
Yeah. And again, with the whole funding thing, we're going to have another workshop on that. I'd totally encourage you all to go. It is so important if you have your own funding. Like when I reached out to advisors, I got a bunch of no's, and I think I got one yes before funding. And then I had applied to the GRFP. I ended up somehow getting an award, which is great. And then that pays for my stipend for 3 years. And it's literally a golden ticket to any school you want to go to. That advisor will say, yep, I'm happy to have you because you're funding yourself. The funding is the main barrier to entry here. So fellowships can really help with that. Speaking of which, I also have, I will show this in the fellowship workshop as well, but This is a guide for the GRFP. I followed someone else's guide and it worked. So hopefully this can help a lot of you.
And one tip is that and when you're applying to these big fellowships, if you apply, that they have requirements of writing statements, and it might be like a personal statement or a research or interest statement, that kind of thing. And if you have to do that for those scholarships, it's actually a good kind of way to learn how to do it for applying to grad school, because in graduate schools they often ask for these statements as well. And in the scholarship workshop that Blake leads and will put on later in the summer, he does a really great job of coaching you on how to write these statements.
Yeah, thanks, Val. I see some questions in the chat. I might move to those if that's all right. Did anyone have anything they wanted to say out loud before we move on to the chat?
You mentioned the funding workshop. When would that be? I'm sorry.
Val, can you consult the schedule? I'm actually not sure.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear the question. When is it? Is that what you said?
Oh yeah, when is the fellowship workshop?
Oh, we haven't scheduled it actually.
Oh, okay.
You're doing some more grad school ones first.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so we will send out that information.
Yeah, we'll send it out. I've got, if you registered to come here, which we have your email, so I can send out the schedule for that. And also Blake he's just an amazing mentor. So if you were to write to him and say, can we meet and look at my CD or something, or talk about grad school, that's his passion, and he is just such a help with that.
Thank you, Val. That's very nice. Yeah, please feel free to email me at any time. We can totally set up a time to chat and go through it. I love when we get to like talk one-on-one and you can tell me about like what research interests you have, and then we can start kind of helping you go from there. So please reach out if you would like to. Okay. I'm going to go to the chat. So Casey asked, is it okay to reach out to 2 advisors from the same school? Yeah, if you know for sure you want to go to a certain school and there's multiple advisors that you could see yourself fitting with, totally reach out and see where it goes with each of them. I would say if it starts getting more serious and one of them thinks that they want to admit you, maybe start to pick which one you would want. But my advice with that is tailor your email to each of them. Say, I read these papers for you and I read these papers for you. Don't just send them the same email. And yeah, it's okay to have some similarities, but they're gonna know essentially at some point if you're talking to another professor in their department. So you can do it. But yeah, if you start to feel like you're gonna go with one over the other, then I think it's good to let them know. Okay. Oh, thank you, Davina. Okay, next question from Emma. How soon should you start applying before you want to go? Okay, yeah, so the application process, I guess most of the deadlines are in December for the actual schools, but I would start early, start in like August, September with this whole process. And then the application is actually in December. And you'll generally know if you got in by March or April. Okay, Allison, great question. How many professors should you reach out to? Here's what's tough. This takes so much time to read people's papers, to reach out to them, to talk to their graduate students, to do all of this stuff. So I would recommend when you're starting, make a list of maybe like 10 faculty members that you want to work with. And then from there, kind of start to weigh out, okay, which schools do I want to go to? Which programs look good? And who's a good mentor? And maybe you'll start to winnow out some of those bottom ones in your personal ranking. From there, like maybe top 5 are good ones to like reach out to, but you can always keep those other ones to reach out to if the first top 5 don't respond or something like that. So I would say like make your ranking, and by the end of it, you should apply to maybe like 5 schools. It is expensive to apply, so keep that in mind as well. If you have the financial means, then sure, apply to a bunch. I didn't, so I applied to 3. Okay. Oh, Val said you make it sound terrifying. I don't want to make it sound terrifying. It's,
no, it was the dating. Sorry, it was the dating analogy that was.
Gotcha. No, this is like a daunting process, but we want to make sure that you feel confident going into it and you feel supported going into it. So don't be afraid, but you can do it and it'll work out,
Yeah,
hopefully.
you will.
Oh, also, if it doesn't work out the first time, you can apply again. Like sometimes it just takes the right professor to get the right grant at the right time. And maybe they'll say, hey, I don't have funding this year, but next year I'm looking for a new student on this project. So be open to things not going according to plan. Also with that, I reached out to a bunch of researchers at NOAA when I was doing this whole process. And I was talking to one of them about their research and like, I was like, I want to go to graduate school. And basically at the end of the conversation, he was like, oh, so like, when can you start? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, oh, we have a position open that's doing this, this, and this. It sounds like you're really interested in this topic. Like, would you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, like I'll apply for the job, but I want to go to graduate school. So I had a backup just from talking to someone. So you never know what's going to happen. Keep your options open. Okay, Ali said, can you go in some detail on your specific undergrad preparation? Do you mean like research experiences in undergrad, or would you mind clarifying that, Ali? Oh, yes, and grades. Oh boy, grades. Okay. So in undergrad, my like first, I guess, introduction to research was I worked in a bug lab, which is like not even remotely close to what I do now, but that lab was awesome. I basically like, they had a project with a bunch of like, it was frog stomachs, and I was basically going through and pulling out different bugs from the frog stomachs, and then the grad student would like sequence them and do his project. But the grad student told me that I could do my own senior thesis if I stuck with that for a year. So then in junior year, she kind of like taught us how to do all of the like molecular stuff, DNA extraction, sequencing, PCR, all that good stuff. And then my senior year, I did a senior research project. It was by no means like a solid project, but it was great experience trying to like get funding, to go through all the lab work, to write up the results. Like it was just great practice. So that was one that I had. And then we had a study abroad program in Tahiti. And when you go to Tahiti, you spend 3 months designing and doing your own research projects. So I did a bunch of fish surveys in a marine protected area and in a non-marine protected area, and I compared them. And I really wanted to get that work published. So I picked like a very, very low impact journal that like, this was again, not a fancy project. It was literally 2 months, but I got that published and that was awesome. And then my third research opportunity was I did an REU program. So I have to say, like, I was very, very fortunate to have people to help me through that process. And I want to acknowledge that that is not the case for everyone. So I am not by any means what you have to go to graduate school. I would say your REU program is fantastic. If you've done another research experience in your university, that's great. But yeah, just get involved with research where you can. Try to get publications, poster presentations, try to go to conferences. All of that is going to be great experience for applying to graduate school, but it is not necessary by any means. Grades, my grades were like, okay, like they varied depending on the class, but again, a professor really wants to see that you have the potential with the research. They don't really care as much about the grades usually. So it's okay if you're not the strongest, let's say, with a couple of different classes that you struggled with, it's okay. Yeah, Val?
Yeah, in terms of the applying, now what was I going to say? I lost my thought. Oh, well, I'll have to come back to it. I just lost it. Sorry.
No worries. Did that answer your question, Ali? Did you want more clarification or anything? Okay, great. Yeah, it's less about the academic record and more about, do you have the drive and the passion, and can they see that you've had maybe some experiences that indicate you're ready for this next step of your career. Yeah, Val.
It came back.
Okay.
So one thing is that with your current program that you're in, an internship program of some kind of, research, this is something to really like blow up on your resume, like make it big. You can describe a lot about what you're doing. You could even include, if you're writing a resume, for instance, you can include some of the different things under different categories. For example, if it was like technical skills or something like that, and you put down Python, took one course and used it in my research to analyze the incoming and outgoing radiation data from NCAR models, or it's not really data, but model output. And so it's people generally, I think undergraduates often don't, they underplay their experience in their resume. And this research experience, there's just a lot of different things that you can include. Like, for example, you're here at this workshop, right? This is considered a professional development workshop. And so you could put down on your resume professional development as a category, and then include any of these seminars that you go to that are not like science content, but they are about other things like diversity or anti-harassment or ethics or all of those. So if our internship manager doesn't think to do this, or your teachers, whoever is instructing you on writing that, ask them to help on a board, for example, help you know, all of you, like in your group, how to write about your internship in the resume. And I made a web page about this, and I don't know if it still applies. I haven't looked at it in a while, but it had the most views of any of the web pages that I had put up, which was, so it's like how to include your internship in your research, in your resume. Another thing is think about projects. Projects are really interesting to grad schools and to employers, because you're working maybe with a group, you're having to analyze and think about the design of the project. Maybe you're writing about it, maybe you're making plots, you're working with different people, doing field work, all of that kind of thing. And so think about course projects that you have done, like, semester-long project or something like that. And then describe it as though it was, it was a research experience. So you could have a category of like research experiences that actually includes some projects that you've done in undergraduate. And then one last thought is, if you have, I guess you all have one more year at least in university, if you want to get more, in your case, more research experience, and you think you can handle the time, and that really depends on what other things you have going on and your course load, you can see if a professor at your school would be willing to have you work with them either on an independent study or on some of their research, maybe crunching data for them, for example, or doing some lab work. And maybe you get to work with their group. You start to be invited to their weekly meeting. And by the end of just one semester, you can put it down as research experience, like you were a research assistant in this lab. And because there are many, many more students than there are internships, like at least 3 times too many, relative to internships, it's worth passing it on to friends as well. Like there are ways to get some experience. Now, in that case, you have to have the resources, like maybe if you're working a job also, you don't have the time, that kind of thing. And then, hopefully they'll pay you if you can afford it, and you can do it voluntarily. If they can't pay you, that it still gives you some experience to include in your application. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Val.
I'm sorry.
There's one other thing. Huh?
Oh, no, it's okay. I was going to add one more idea.
Sure.
Okay, so if you're not sure about, what area to study and investigate, and in addition to the great tips that Blake gave you about, looking at papers and classes that you enjoyed, another thing I like to do is can do this on Indeed, but also just on the web. You can, let's say you put in keywords that might be a place you would consider living. This is just sort of exploring ideas of like what kind of jobs you might want in the future. Let's say you put down, Dallas and hurricanes, and but instead of just clicking on the regular all button, you click on the news button of the web browser. And so what comes up with the news button is stories in the news. And maybe you mess around with the keywords a little bit, but, or you might say like Boston, environmental justice, and then things come up and it's stories that you can read about and then read about who's doing it. And, you know, that can help you kind of explore a little bit, because I think when we're in university, it's easy to think mainly about what you're taught at school and not necessarily, or what you're learning at school and not necessarily what is really your passion. You know, like if you want to do environmental justice, pretty decent chance you didn't really get to do that if you're in the natural sciences. And so take a look, like let yourself explore beyond what any professor has ever talked about, things that matter to you. That's all I have.
Awesome. All right, so Emma had another question in the chat, which was, how do you know if a program requires you to reach out to advisor first? I would assume that that's the baseline, is that you need to reach out. If you're talking to graduate students and they say, no, you just apply to the school and you do rotations, then take that into account. But I would assume for most programs that you need to reach out to the advisors. That's generally how it goes.
And there's also usually a grad, I don't know what they're called in the office, like the front office of the department, some kind of grad school person who you can ask as well, or, you know, the main administrative assistant or whoever, they'll tell you as well.
Yep, absolutely. Ali asked, can you provide the link on how to write your internship in your resume webpage?
Oh, okay, I looked for it.
Val, we used to do that workshop of including the REU in the resume. Maybe we should bring that back.
Maybe we should.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we have one in a few weeks or a month that is about cover letters, resumes, and that kind of thing. And so we could include it there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I liked that one because we had all the students like tell us about their project and then the things they learned, and then we kind of like helped them get it into like a little bullet. Like that was really fun. I liked that one.
Okay.
Maybe we should bring that back. Okay, anyway, sorry, side note, guys. Does anyone else have any other questions about graduate school?
No, I just wanted to say thank you. At Navajo Technical University, that's where I'm a student. So sometimes you're lacking mentors to share their experiences on like grad school, or, you know, just trying to use the resources that's out there. And so who are you going to talk to? And so I just have like a few mentors there that, you know, if it wasn't for him, I won't be here today, you know, to where I'm going. So I want to reach out more to other mentors to be able to get more experiences and to learn. So I just want to know, thank you for providing, you know, all the insights of, you know, your experiences. So I'm just thankful. Thank you.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much.
You.
Yeah, thanks for being here, you all. Like this is great. And I hope that we can also be resources for you as well. If you're starting to go through this process and you have questions and need any help, please feel free to reach out.
Emma, this is not actually the web page that I made. I haven't found it yet, but it's one that's similar. So you can also look around as well. I'll take a look for it though, and we can send out resources from today to your email.
Yeah, including the slides and then the links to the different Google Drives and stuff like that. We can send that out as well.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you. It's so nice to have a small group actually, where we can talk a little bit better. Is any chance I could ask everybody to turn on their video so I could do a quick screenshot photo? Okay, I'll do a partial. Oh, there we go. Great. Okay, smile. Oh, there we go. We got more people coming. Oh, look, 2 people in one room. Hi. Okay, you ready? Noah and Katie, you're not coming on? Oh, there they are. All right. Okay. Smile and wave. And I'm going to do one more. We don't do this very often and it's not enough. Okay, one more. Okay. Thank you. And then we can also send this to your, your REU leaders and maybe to the NSF funders, because it's fun for them to see like real human beings and not just read about reports and things. Anyway, good for you coming to this. It's the kind of thing you think, oh, I don't really have time for it, but these things can really help make a difference. And I think good for you. Hats off to you for coming. And it was lovely to meet you.
Yeah, if you all have any more questions, my email, I just put it in the chat. Feel free to reach out. Happy to chat whenever. So yeah, thanks so much for coming. And yeah, if anyone wants to hang out a little bit after and ask other questions, you're totally welcome to. Bye, everyone.